To what extent did propaganda change during the course of World War One in Britain, and what were the effects in other nations? So, before 1916, British propaganda focused on the hatred of the enemy and the recruitment. Lord Kitchener's poster made and influenced young boys to join the British Army by saying, "Your country needs you." Another is in quotes, "The army isn't all work." Obvious use of propaganda to recruit troops, to show that the army can be fun and games, and you can have a laugh with your friends. You could argue that this is good use of propaganda because it brings in recruits, which is what the army needs. However, this is all lies because the army knew that no one would go if the truth was told, so they lied to get people in. So how did the messages change over time, mainly in Britain? Propaganda tried to get people to contribute to the war in many ways. For example, working in factories, mainly for women, growing your own food, or signing up for the war itself from 1914 to 1915. In quotes, "The kitchen is the key to victory. Eat less bread." This poster is a typical example of propaganda for women. There were extreme food shortages in Britain, needed to supply as much food as they possibly could. So they used positive or negative propaganda to make this work. Many videos from the war inspired women to go out and work and help the troops. Watch Broke in 1916, a video from the sources we were given. The government was so confident that they allowed filmmakers into the front line to film what was going on. However, only some were real and some were reconstructed. Kathleen Barron, the films of war in the cinema would affect the way she played on her piano. She said, "Touch, gentle touch, or firmness. If it was bombing or terrible fights, I would know what sort of music to play." Kathleen created the effect of the war on every single person in the cinema she played in. This video argues that propaganda was good or bad for the war, because specifically this video talks about the horrors that people were witnessing in the cinema at home. British propaganda changed after 1916. Beforehand, it was focused on recruitment, but once conscription was introduced, they focused more on growing food. In Britain, the arts experienced a drastic shift of focus over the course of the conflict. At the outset, Germany's invasion of neutral Belgium as part of the Schlieffen Plan gave the Allies a distinct propaganda advantage. Allied propaganda films focused on the evils of Germany by reenacting fictitious German atrocities in Belgium and the very real physical devastation caused by the baby killer Zeppelins in Scarborough. Poetry presented the war as a noble stand against a tyrannical enemy. Rupert Brooks, the soldier. There is some corner of a foreign field that is forever England. To Lawrence Binyon's For the Fallen. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. Romanticize those killed in battle as heroic immortals. Germany found it difficult to produce an effective response in propaganda terms, and had no argument need to do so, given that conscription removed the need to attract recruits into the armed forces. From 1916, British propaganda no longer needed to focus on recruitment since conscription had been introduced. Instead, it focused on food production. 1916 was a turning point. The introduction of conscription in Britain meant that propaganda no longer needed to encourage men to join the army, and the Battle of the Somme made it impossible to hide the murderous reality of war. Suddenly, government propaganda films, for example, Malin's Battle of the Somme, began highlighting rather than downplaying the horror of the Western Front to encourage the civilians back home to give their support to men on leave rather than trivialize their experiences. Poetry too shifted in tone. An early idealistic, such as Wilfred Owen, started to produce dark, bitter poems such as Dulce et decrum est, vil incurable swords on innocent tongues, whilst hardened cynics such as Siegfried Sassoon continued to rave against the futility of war. You smoke-faced cowards, sneak home and pray you'll never know the hell where youth and laughter go. In contrast, American propaganda always focused on food production because British propaganda tried to encourage people to grow their own food, whereas the American propaganda encouraged people to eat less or substitute. This may have been because American food supplies were not hit anywhere near as hard during the war in Britain's as Britain's was the naval blockade. Britain inspired hatred towards Germany, whereas America tried to make the men feel more proud of serving their nation than hateful of the enemy. Both nations tried to make men look cowardly for not joining the war. Germany tried instead to exaggerate their victories and successes in the war. For example, they claimed to have half destroyed London with their air raids, which was completely false. So in what ways did the propaganda have a positive or negative effect in Britain and in other nations? So positive. 2 million men in Britain had signed up for the war before conscription. Excellent recruitment drive. Another positive, the campaign to grow and save food meant that neither France nor Britain were starved into surrender. However, now we have some negatives. Germans were angered by the British propaganda against them. They felt that they were depicted unfairly, and that they were not bloodthirsty and evil like they were depicted. And finally, many videos from the front line fighting depressed British people. They realised just how bad the conditions were and realised that they had not thought enough about their soldiers being killed.